Welcome back. However, unfortunately, due to some bad personal news, I'm having to cut this short. The intention was for two more parts to this report. Firstly, I was going to address Councillor Tierney's many claims of victim status, to then discuss issues surrounding what happened during the COVID crisis. However, I now need to combine the two together with just short extracts of each. So, starting with his victim status, between 2017 and 2019, 3 conduct complaints were entered against Councillor Tierney. Yet after the third, he lashed out in the Fenland Citizen newspaper, where he apparently claimed all 3 complaints were trumped up nonsense. Now, as you saw in part 2, at the very least, the 2017 complaint proved he made false allegations when attacking people. So a perfectly valid complaint, not trumped up nonsense. Now, on the first page of the defence document for that complaint, he also demanded how he was going to show it for the nonsense he claims it was. So let's remind ourselves how that went, shall we? Quote in part 2. Quite simply, I believe the evidence seems to clearly expose how all of Councillor Tierney's principal conclusions found on the final page of his official defence document were based on complete and utter fiction. All of them. Now, both the 2018 and 2019 complaints were also clearly evidence-based. For example, the 2019 complaint was related to this extremely specific post and the disturbing and violently graphic comments it provoked. And his defence this time, he claimed, my post was clearly about a hypothetical person. How is this highly detailed and specific post clearly about a hypothetical person? Maybe we should consider the last time he claimed something was clear. Again, quote in part 2. This then confirmed in his final conclusions found on the last page of his defence, when he demands, what they refer to as false allegations are simply personal opinions with which they disagree and are clearly shown as such. I believe it's quite clear this one sentence alone is literally filled with lies. They were not opinions, they were not clearly shown as such, and as we will now see, they were not disagreed with, but some evidence to be false. And that's before we consider such comments as this. I also presume we're all supposed to be too dumb to ask, why would Councillor Tierney wait until he needed a defence before coming up with what appears to be such a fanciful explanation? Surely any responsible person, a reasonable requirement for an elected official I should think, would have instantly stopped any confusion, thus avoiding an innocent man potentially being targeted with such violence, not post a smiley face. No, the truth is, as far as I'm concerned, all 3 complaints were evidence-based, and clearly so. And therefore, arguably, it was Councillor Tierney's public attack that consisted of trumped-up nonsense. As with people's right to process or file petitions, as mentioned in part 2, people have the right to use a council's code of conduct procedures without being publicly demonised by an elected official, especially if based on fraudulent allegations they invented their grievances. And this, it would seem, is Councillor Tierney's idea of being a victim. Moreover, consider this. He also claimed all the conduct committee allows is for people to make spurious complaints. Yet a couple of months before the 2017 complaint, he entered one of his own. Now, after it was categorised as trivial and tit for tat, one committee member stated, the nature of the complaint, the use of a particular word, is trivial to the point that he is surprised that we are here considering it. So was it not in fact Councillor Tierney himself who entered a weak and spurious complaint, to then possibly once again accuse others of his own conduct? And the particular word? Threatened. Councillor Tierney felt this was downright awful and would bring the council into disrepute. And what then of this? Scumbags, hate fest, racist, sexist, generic haters, lazy lay, pack of lies, extreme bias. Just a few of the accusations, some proven false, dismissed by the same council officers who just a couple of months before apparently upheld Councillor Tierney's complaint based on the single word, threatened. Now finally, just before we move on, consider how in 2017 he defended an attack as a criticism of behaviour, which he suggested was a necessity of democracy. There also seemed no denial of inflicting a barrage of criticism onto others, but instead claimed how criticism is not a breach of the Council's Code of Conduct. However, in his defence document for the 2019 complaint, he now seems to take the opposite view and demands John Elworthy also regularly makes critical comments of a similar type, a relentless campaign that could easily have a negative impact on myself and my family. And please understand, the criticism he claimed could have had such a negative impact on his family appears to pale in significance to his own attacks of John Elworthy, some of which, as shown in part 2, were complete fiction. So it would appear, if we liken Councillor Tierney's idea of criticism being a healthy part of democracy to a game of tennis, for example, it seems he would insist the net is up when his opponent serves, but then demand it be taken down when he serves. Seriously, does Councillor Tierney expect us all to believe he should be able to attack who he wants, when he wants, how he wants, use false allegations, report fictional accounts of council business, demonise complainants with seemingly fraudulent claims, and it's all his right to freedom of speech and should be judged as a healthy criticism of behaviour and exactly what councillors should be doing? To then demand he should be allowed to demonise anybody who dares criticise his behaviour by calling them liars, scumbags, generic haters, and ask the public to then see him as the poor innocent little victim. Or perhaps to use his own words from his blog post Error in Judgment. I'm not sure how many more times he can play the victim card while being the one doing the attacking and get away with it. In fact, I think he stopped getting away with it a while ago. Once again, Councillor Tierney, couldn't agree more. So let's now take a quick look at a couple of examples regarding the COVID crisis. You see, in March 2020, and in the midst of the first lockdown, like many others, Councillor Tierney and 2 of his colleagues were shopping for those in need, something that, if done for the right intent, is an honourable enough act. However, unlike others operating such services, and seemingly in clear breach of social distancing rules, the 3 of them were seen car sharing. This then received online criticism, which in turn generated yet another article in the Fen and Citizen. First we get a long speech, which for me, personally, was all very reminiscent of the FACT campaign. You see, the old FACT management, similarly guilty of making false declarations, regularly used the charitable work they were doing to plead the victim status and demonise our campaign. Also, as Councillor Tierney's speech is full of unsubstantiated statements, I once again feel the need to quote myself from part 2. However, with all of that being said, the one thing I personally believe cannot now be argued is when speaking in his official capacity, whether attacking people, talking of himself, reporting council business or defending his official actions, nothing Councillor Tierney says can ever blindly be believed again. For example, here it appears he tries to justify their conduct by the use of the word impossible. Yet it seems none of the others operating the same services found it impossible to operate without 3 people car sharing. And what then if we bring this statement into the equation? Dave and Sam live alone and are socially distancing themselves from their families and friends, so they are minimising the risks of infecting anybody. However, in July, another story broke, where it was reported how Dave, or officially Councillor Topgood, had apparently been homeless since February, and now alleged to be sofa surfing. Therefore, seemingly in complete conflict with Councillor Tierney's assurances, Councillor Hoy is now reported to have confirmed how she was in fact aware he had been staying with friends, and even informed us how he had been staying with various people. So it would appear possibly not in fact living alone and minimising the risk of infecting anybody. Finally, the day before Councillor Tierney's comments were published, he clashed online with the wife of the new FACT chairman. Basically, she was offering help to a woman in Wisbech when Councillor Tierney started throwing his member for emergency planning title around and implying her offer was unhelpful. As I understand it, the new FAC chairman immediately offered his help to Councillor Tierney. Basically, FAC would do all their shopping and prescriptions for them, thus responsibly removing the risk associated with breaking distancing rules. Then they would simply drop it all off over to Wisbech for them in individual customer boxes, so all Councillor Tierney and his colleagues had to do was to deliver it. This offer was never accepted, yet Councillor Tierney stated, "If we are forced to give up what we are doing, then those vulnerable people will have no choice but to risk going out and getting their own supplies." How is that true? Surely all they had to do was accept FAC's offer. Here he was 2 months later, still singing the same mantra. Each to their own opinion. Though mine, based on what you've witnessed and much, much more, is this was simply a disingenuous scaremongering to once again incite ill feeling, attack the opposition and the local editor, and promote his official position. Anyway, this is basically where I'm going to have to finish. Now, despite what some people may think, the original motive of this report was as a prelude to a discussion on local democracy as a whole, which possibly may not now happen. So I'm just quickly going to say a few words on it. Now, it seems a small group of local councillors may be trying to manipulate our local council and possibly trying to destroy any opposition whatsoever, including within their own party. You see, it appears there is evidence to suggest how experienced councillors may have been deselected and replaced with weaker candidates. Some believe replaced with councillors this small group can control. Now, how is that in the public's interest? The Greeks made it perfectly clear that democracy will never work as long as you allow those who want to rule to actually rule. Now, not only do I agree with this, but I believe my experiences have shown me in areas such as ours, monopolised by a dominating party, quite often the wrong people are attracted into local government. Maybe highly ambitious individuals, but who, in the private sector, where their advancement is directly linked to their abilities, remained without real position. Consequently, I believe they are then attracted into local government, where, if aligned to the dominating party, every 4 years they simply gain position by holding a 60-metre head start in a 100-metre sprint. It would then seem, why around 70% of us are looking the other way, they get to operate in a system of almost zero accountability, to then hold senior positions way beyond their individual abilities, possibly with the taxpayer footing the bill, if I may quote myself regarding the FAC campaign. How is it for years a taxi driver could see all this going on from the outside, yet despite having evidence rubbed in their faces, senior councillors sitting on the inside and experienced in procedures couldn't work out what was happening? And understand, if it was left to those councillors, the old FAC management would likely still be at it today. And that £1 million of abused funding? Well, God knows how much it would be. And what else is actually going on behind closed doors? Anyway, final words on Councillor Tierney. As with his 2017 defence, I have no doubt whatsoever that he will likely spin some irrational nonsense for all of this. But what of all the possible effects of his years of apparent online propaganda had on the public perception? Well, maybe we should once again look at Councillor Tierney's own words for the possible truth. When in his blog post, Why Bother, he declares, "So why do I do it? Why do I waste hours of my time pointing out the errors, falsities and just plain lies that a handful of individuals like to put about? Well, it's not for them, I promise. I could not care less what a few individuals who drip poison on the internet say or why. The problem is that they are talking to thousands of other reasonable people who may not respond, who may not engage with the argument at all, but who do see it." He concludes with, "If a lie is repeated often enough, people start to believe it. And this is particularly true if nobody ever bothers to challenge it." Once again, Councillor Tierney, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. But I will add, evidence has shown, once people believe a lie, even when confronted with evidence to the contrary, they are unlikely to change their viewpoint. Consequently, I don't and never did expect this report to change anything locally, but as already stated, it was originally intended as a prelude to one final report regarding local democracy as a whole. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Take care, stay safe, and as hard as it may seem at times, try not to let the buggers get you down. Bye-bye.